Please note that the views expressed on this program are those of the individuals who speak them, and not necessarily those of Portsmouth Community Radio, its Board of Trustees, members, volunteers, or underwriters. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willie Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. And good evening once again, and welcome to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. I am your host, Willie Hassell, your gatekeeper to the dark side, your guide to the realm of the unknown, the unseen, the unthinkable. And she is the always lovely. She is the mystical. She is the mysterious.
It's me.
It's her. It's Lynn Nickerson. How are you tonight?
Good evening, Willie.
How you doing?
What's happening?
Oh, just another day in paradise. And yourself?
It is that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little rainy, but at least it's not real cold.
No. It's going to be really rainy tomorrow. Have you got your rowboat, your canoe?
I do.
Whatever it is.
It's on stilts. I'm expecting a flood.
It could be from what I'm hearing. Yeah,
yes.
All right. Well, tonight on Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. Once again, we welcome to the show our friend Jeremy D'Entremont. And Jeremy is our local expert on all things paranormal, all things lighthouses, with over a dozen books published on the subject. But he is also a paranormal researcher and has many tales of lighthouse hauntings up and down the New England coast. But tonight, Jeremy joins us with a whole new arsenal of lighthouse hauntings. He has recently completed a tour of the West Coast investigating and researching these beautiful beacons of navigation from San Diego to Canada. And actually, I understand he's even got Alaska and Hawaii in there, too. That's right.
Didn't get to go there, but they're in the book.
Yeah. Oh, terrific.
So his new book, the Lighthouse Handbook West Coast, is due to be released on March 15th. So let us welcome once again to the show, Jeremy D'Entremont. Good evening, Jeremy.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Always nice to be here.
Welcome again. So nice to see you.
Willie.
It's always nice to have you here.
Well, I hope you got some good pictures, because your photographs are outstanding.
Oh, thank you so much. I think I got some good ones. Yeah,
and they do go really well on the radio.
Yeah, it's a great
right.
medium for lighthouse photographs.
And they go really well, too, with the text in the book.
They especially go well at that.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Well, I don't know if people realize this, but Jeremy is not only a photographer, but he's also a webmaster of the New England Lighthouses, a virtual guide. Mm-hmm. And he's also the founder of the Friends of the Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse. And he's the historian for the American Lighthouse Foundation. So he wears many hats, and he's very talented.
Indeed, I do.
And he's a very busy guy.
Very busy guy. He also has extracts, paranormal journeys that he offers in this summer and fall. And well, we're just really lucky to have him here because he's such a busy guy.
I know, it's so nice of him to fit us into his schedule.
It is.
We always appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Always nice to have him here. And I do want to mention that since Jeremy is right here in the studio with us.
Yes, right here in the flesh.
That means he is not on the telephone.
That's right.
And that means the phone line is open if anybody wants to call.
Anybody has any questions?
603-430-9722, I think. Is this all right?
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
Don't look at me.
I was just taking a guess at it. Not really sure.
Well, before we get on your tour and your books on the lighthouses on the West Coast, you were just recently on KCBS in San Francisco, right? Being interviewed. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, that was fun. That had nothing to do with paranormal or anything like that, but it's a news station out in San Francisco people around in the Portsmouth area here are probably familiar with WBZ in Boston.
Right.
It's the
Sister
KCBS
station?
is kind of a sister station.
Yeah.
So they wanted to talk about the flying Santa to the lighthouses, the
That's
history
right.
of that, which is a very, very fascinating story in its own. I don't know how deeply we want to get into that.
Well, an
but
86-year-old tradition that was started by Edward
Yes.
Rose Snow, right?
Well, it wasn't started by him. It was
But he
started
certainly
by
did.
a pilot named Bill Winkapaw in Maine.
Oh, okay.
But Edward Rose Snow got involved in the 30s, and he kept it going for more than 40 years.
How wonderful.
And it's just a tremendous tradition that is still done via helicopter by a nonprofit organization, the Friends of Flying Santa. And the helicopters land at Coast Guard stations. And it used to be, the tradition used to be that planes, Santa would fly over in a plane at the Christmas season over the lighthouses, and Santa would drop presents for lighthouse keepers and their
how
families.
cool.
But today it's done by helicopter, so that Santa actually gets out and actually personally hands presents to the children of Coast Guard families at these Coast Guard stations.
And that's primarily something that's done on the East Coast.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, pretty much New York to northern Maine.
Yeah.
Serving several dozen Coast Guard units and over 1,000 kids each year.
Oh, that's
so it's a beautiful
nice.
way of saying thank you to the Coast Guard. So if,
Yeah,
I know
such
it's not a little bit off topic here, but if people want to read
that's
about that, flyingsanta.org on the internet is a great place to
Oh, cool.
read about
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, that is such a nice idea, isn't it? You know?
Oh, it really is. Well, Jeremy has a list of lighthouses he wanted to talk about, and he did bring in a bunch of tales that go along with some of these, and some of them are, well, I guess all of these tonight will be a little bit paranormal. So would you like to start at the beginning where you began your trip, Jeremy?
Sure. Just to clarify, I went to the West Coast last spring in April and May, and I spent 25 days on the West Coast.
Oh, my gosh.
I photographed about 70 lighthouses in 25 days, so it was kind of a whirlwind
Wow.
trip, to say the
Yeah.
least. By myself, my wife would have killed me if she went with me. There was way too much driving from lighthouse to lighthouse for anybody else to take. So I think it was best that I was by myself. And I photographed virtually every lighthouse in California, and most of them in Oregon and Washington, and a good number in British Columbia. I didn't get to the more remote. There's a lot of very remote lighthouses in British Columbia on islands and stuff like that. So I didn't get to nearly all of those, and I also wasn't able to go to Alaska and Hawaii, although they are included in the book. The book is will primarily be a travel guide telling people how to get to these lighthouses, along with a couple of pages of history of each one and photographs and so forth.
It's pretty much set up like your other one on New England.
I see you have the
Handbook.
Lighthouse Handbook New England there,
Yep.
which, by the way, will be coming out in a new third edition
Really?
this March also.
Well,
So right around the same time, the West Coast book is coming out, and a third edition of my book, The Lighthouse Handbook New England, will also be coming out.
Oh, terrific. It is so nicely. I love the way it's formatted. It's just so informative. And your little factoids, your little fascinating facts.
Fascinating
are really
facts, yeah.
Terrific.
The publishing company, Cider Mill Press in Kenny Bunkport, has done a wonderful job. The designer they use, this woman, her name is Vicki Von Shea, and the editor we've worked with, Mike Urban. It's been a great team. I've done 3
yeah.
books with them, so I'm very
It's a
pleased with
beautiful
how
production.
they've worked out.
So is it going to look like that? the
It's
new
going to
one?
look very much like that. Yeah.
Terrific.
It'll be very similar in many ways, just be the West Coast instead of New England.
Terrific.
And the release date is March 15th, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
The Ides of March. The
Woohoo.
West Coast book. Beware the Ides of March. So out of about 140 something lighthouses that will be in the book, and about half of those I actually photographed myself. Out of those, I have found paranormal stories, ghost type stories, for about a dozen, about 12 or 13, and I have notes on those with me today. So, that's not to say that that's all the ghost stories there are for West Coast lighthouses. I found, in 30 years of studying New England lighthouses, I found that if you dig deep enough for any particular lighthouse, you're probably going to find a ghost story in there somewhere.
They keep
Yeah,
rising to the surface.
And there's only so much you can find out in 25 days with all those lighthouses.
Truly,
Right. Well, I
yeah.
did a lot of research before and after as well,
Yeah.
writing the book. But I'm sure there's stories I haven't found yet. There's just obviously so many of these stories. But I have, some of the ones that have been talked about and written about the most. There are some that are actually quite well known, some of the ghost stories.
All right.
But we're all ears.
So for the New England lighthouses, I know the New England lighthouses kind of like the back of my hand. I know the ghost stories related to them backwards and forwards. For the West Coast, I do have to refer to notes here.
You don't have to tell them that.
Oh, okay. That's right. They can't see that.
Nobody knows that.
Can't see.
Well, except this is going to be on YouTube or something too, right? So.
Yeah, but the camera
Oh, okay.
can't see
All
your
right,
notes.
never mind. Totally ignore what I just said.
Never mind.
Yeah, this is all. I have complete recall of all this. It's all off the top of my head. So I did the trip. I flew into San Diego on the trip, and I drove in the neighborhood of 3,000 miles. I didn't keep exact track of how many miles I drove on the trip, but I
grief.
zigzagged all over the place, and I drove all the way to British Columbia. So it was a lot of driving.
Quite a trip, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the ghost stories. Why don't we start in Southern California? The one that's the farthest south in California where I found an interesting ghost story is a lighthouse called Point Vicente, which is in the Palos Verdes community, which is very close to Los Angeles. Beautiful location. Very high bluff. It's up on this high cliff, almost 200 feet above the water, surrounded by palm trees.
With a red roof. Is that red roof compound? Is that the one?
Yeah.
It's got several buildings to
Yes.
it. That
So
is
you-
beautiful.
have you been there, or-
No, just from your picture. You posted
Oh,
that
okay.
picture on your site.
I think I did post some pictures of it, yeah.
Just beautiful.
Yeah, I have a Facebook page for the West Coast, the Lighthouse Handbook West Coast. So I
Terrific.
posted a lot of photos on there. But the lighthouse there was built in 1926, and it didn't really have that long a history as a staff station. The keepers living at it. It was turned off, as many lighthouses were during World War II. Basically, on both the East Coast and the West Coast, they blacked out the lighthouses so they wouldn't aid the enemy, coming into the harbors and so forth. But then after World War II, they turned the lighthouse back on at Point Vicente, and I guess it had a brighter light at that point than it did before. And people started to complain that some of the people who lived in the area, this bright white light was shining into their homes and so forth. It was not just shining out into the ocean, it was shining on the land side as well. And the people even complained that when they would be driving by the location, the light got in their eyes when they were driving by. So it was creating problems. So in an attempt to fix that or solve that problem, the keepers actually painted the land-facing side of the lantern glass, surrounding the light. They painted it white. But after that, people started saying that at night, when it had still has a revolving, beautiful lens. If you know what a Fresnel lens is, a beautiful glass lens made in France. In this case, third order, which means the third to the largest size made. So a beautiful, large, rotating lens. And they say that after they painted that side of the glass white, that people started saying they could see the image of a woman walking around the light at night. They swore that they were seeing like a woman in an old-fashioned gown or dress or something like that walking around the lens. But apparently what they were actually seeing was just the rotation of the lens seen through that opaque, white paint. So it had a very weird look to it. But people were swearing they were seeing a woman walking across. So it got the nickname of the Lady in the Light, and all these legends grew up around it. And some versions of if you look on the internet, if you were to Google Point Vicente Lighthouse Ghost, you'll find these stories about the Lady of the Light. Some saying that she was a heartbroken woman, possibly one of the family members of a lighthouse keeper there, and that she dove to her death off the cliff when her lover abandoned her or something like that. So there's variations on it, but there's stories like that. Yeah. This is one of those cases that I think it's very entertaining and it's interesting, but I really think it falls into the category of legend rather than true story. I think people's imaginations kind of ran away with them there.
Now, is that on the mainland and not a rock out in the ocean?
It is. It's on the mainland.
On the mainland.
It's a beautiful place where people spend a lot of time watching whales passing by the way. These pods of gray whales pass by there migrating. And when I was there, I was on like the last day of the annual whale migration, and there were still some people there watching, and they said they'd only seen one whale that day. So I was a little late for the whale migration. But anyway, that's another thing that location is known for. Working our way north, the next location I have on my notes is Alcatraz.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure when people think of Alcatraz, they don't necessarily think of a lighthouse first. Obviously, they think of the famous prison there at Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay. But there is a lighthouse there. In fact, the lighthouse at Alcatraz is the oldest lighthouse on the West Coast. It was the first lighthouse on the West Coast.
What year?
1854, the first lighthouse at Alcatraz, yeah. There were a few more shortly after that, but Alcatraz was the first. And
was the lighthouse there before the prison?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't remember when the prison was built.
The prison, according to my notes, if I have this, I believe the prison was only in operation. Well, it was in operation as a federal penitentiary from 1933 to 1963. I believe there was some use before that, some sort of prison before that, but the lighthouse came well before there was a prison
before
there.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. The original lighthouse there was what people sometimes call a Cape Cod style lighthouse. It was like a keeper's house with the lantern perched on the roof. Interesting because there were a lot of those on Cape Cod, but there are no more Cape Cod style lighthouses on Cape Cod. But
they're in California now.
Yeah. Well, the one at Alcatraz was later replaced by a concrete tower, the one that's there now, that was built in 1909. If people saw the movie The Rock with Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage, there was a scene where the lighthouse is basically destroyed by gunfire, which they didn't really do. They built a replica.
Yeah.
But it appeared in that movie. It's been in some other movies as well. But I don't know of any ghost stories connected to the lighthouse at Alcatraz, but there are certainly a lot of ghost stories attached to the prison, as there are at so many old prisons. That seems to be a pretty common thing, as you well know.
And you went to Alcatraz, right?
I did go to Alcatraz. You know, I've done a lot of tours in my life, like guided tours at historic houses and things like that. At Alcatraz, they give you an audio, recording that you wear headphones and walk through on your own. And so it's a self-guided audio tour. It is absolutely one of the best tours I've ever done in my life.
Really?
It's
Why?
wonderful.
From what perspective?
It's very... I found it very emotionally intense. It's actually narrated by a man who had been a guard, was an actual guard there.
Yeah.
And the voices you hear throughout the recording are other guards and prisoners and other people who work there.
First-hand accounts.
They're first-hand accounts, exactly, which makes it very special.
Yep.
And you go through a lot of different parts of the prison on the tour. You really get to see a lot. And I'll tell you, there was one part where they tell you to walk into this particular cell, which was a solitary confinement cell in the prison. And I walked in there, and at the time, it was pretty crowded when I was there, but at that moment, I happened to be the only person going into this solitary cell. And it was pitch dark, absolutely dark. And they told the recording said, just pause here for maybe a minute and just take it in. And so I was like quiet, completely quiet, and I'm in there by myself in the dark. And
Was there a place to sit, or did you have to stand?
No, I was standing there in the dark. And I was almost overcome with emotion. I mean, this emotion kind of flooded over me.
Yeah.
Did you also get a panicky feeling?
I would say pretty close to panicky. Yeah.
The darkness and knowing.
Yeah. I felt, I felt like I had just a tiny inkling of what it must have been like to actually been thrown in there in solitary. Not that I experienced anything that would compare to what they experienced, but you just got a slight, suggestion of that.
Scintilla.
Yeah.
Yes.
Scintilla is a good word. So I kind of, all of a sudden I felt the need to get out of there in a hurry,
Yeah.
So I certainly wouldn't say I had a paranormal experience or anything, but I certainly felt tremendous emotion. And, you just get the feeling going through this place that if you believe in any of this the paranormal, which, I have a very open mind about this stuff. If there's any place that would have that sort of thing going on, it's got to be a place like
it's a breeding ground, yeah.
Oh, yeah, so much energy and emotion.
So much suffering.
And suffering, in a place like that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stories. If people want to read more in depth about it, if you were to Google Alcatraz ghost stories, there's tons of material.
Are there
out
really?
Yeah. But it's I've made a few notes here, some of the more common things. For one thing, of course, Al Capone. The infamous criminal spent time there near the end of his life. And they say that at recreation time, he, instead of going outside, he had a banjo, and he would sit in the shower room and play his banjo. And they say the people sometimes still hear, there's no banjo around anymore. Nobody's playing the banjo, but they hear banjo music in that area where he hung out. They say that people hear moaning and groaning coming from some of the cell block areas when there's nobody there, that sort of thing. Let me read you this one thing I found in a couple of places online. This has to do with a particular cell numbered 14D, and I guess the D cell block. They say that a prisoner there in that cell screamed all night, kept screaming all night, saying there was a green-eyed monster in his cell and that was trying to kill him. And they say that after screaming that all night, the next morning the guards found him dead, and he had been strangled. But there was nobody else could have gotten into the cell, according to the story. And they say that after that, what kept happening is when they would do a prisoner count, and the prisoners, I think, would have to stand in the front of their cell, and they would count them. They would do a head count, and there was always one more. It's like there was somebody extra that they were counting.
Oh, that's odd.
Some of the other prisoners claimed that they would see that prisoner who had been killed at cell 14D standing in line, when they would come out for the count. And then after the count, he would be gone. He would disappear again. So, I can't verify that, but I've seen the story in a couple of places.
But they generally left that cell vacant. Was that the idea after he died?
No, I think it was used, but I think that the person who supposedly had been killed, they would line up outside the cells, and he would show up in the lineup.
And they just came up with one extra. It seems like I have heard that story about screaming about the green-eyed monster in the cell.
Yeah. So, again,
So,
it's hard sometimes to separate fact from legend, but Alcatraz is absolutely full of these kinds of stories.
When he was discovered, was there something around his neck or just the bruising?
I can't tell you the details.
They didn't
of that.
say.
I've just seen references that he was supposedly strangled, but I wasn't there. I can't.
Yeah,
I'm not sure precisely what happened. Yeah. I don't know if you want to talk more about Alcatraz, or I should.
Do you have another
keep
story?
Moving on. Not really. A lot of it that I've seen is more general, just the moaning and groaning and that sort of thing. But again, of all the places I visited during my West Coast trip, I certainly felt more emotion there than anywhere else. I mean, I saw incredible beauty at some of these places that gave me a certain emotion of that sort.
Sure.
But
different kind of emotion.
Very, very different. Yeah, as far as dark emotions, there was nothing like Alcatraz. But it's a fascinating place to visit.
How long were you there, Jeremy?
The tour, probably on the island for just a couple of hours. The tour, the audio tour takes, I think, something like an hour and a half, thereabouts.
And how long did the boat trip take to get out there?
It's not that long.
20 minutes, half an hour?
20 minutes, half an hour, somewhere in there, yeah.
Okay. Well, then what was the next one you visited?
Next one, the next one I have notes on for this type of thing, is the Point Sur Lighthouse.
Oh,
you've probably heard of Point Sur or Big Sur in that area. That it's a spectacular area. The Point Sur Lighthouse is so unique, the location. Basically, it's a gigantic volcanic boulder that's almost 400 feet above the water, and the lighthouse and other buildings are perched on top of this volcanic rock.
How did they build up there?
With great difficulty, really.
And is this boulder separated by water from the mainland, or is it?
No, it's attached to the mainland, but it's surrounded by like a ranch. So it's surrounded by a privately owned ranch, so you have to go on a special tour to get there, and I was able to make special arrangements to get a ride there. But so this woman, picked me up, and we drove this little road through this ranch with cattle just lying around on the side of the road as we drove to the lighthouse. Yeah. But you can get in on group tours, to see the place. But it's absolutely spectacular. And then you drive, uphill to the lighthouse. And it's been featured on some of the shows. I know the Ghost Adventures did an episode there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's been written about like a few years ago. Whatchamacallit, Coastal Living Magazine did a article. They said were the top 10 haunted lighthouses in America. And I believe Point Sur was number 4 on the list. Well, we had the number 1. Owl's Head in Maine was the number 1 haunted lighthouse.
Really?
According to them. I don't know how you measure that sort of thing. But,
Creepiness, I guess, wouldn't it be?
But anyway, at Point Sur, it was a fascinating tour. And while I was there, fog came in. Was when they were showing me around. By the time we were leaving, it was so fogged in, you couldn't see the ocean anymore. You couldn't see past the edge of the cliff around us, So that always gives a place a more kind of creepy feeling as well.
A little atmosphere.
They say that the first ghost sort of story related to that lighthouse goes back to 1875, before the lighthouse was built, which was 1889. There was a shipwreck off Point Sur. A ship called the Ventura was wrecked right near there, just north of there. And they say that the captain was drunk. I'm not sure about that, but I've read that. And the fact that there was no lighthouse there certainly didn't help. There was nothing to guide them along that part of the coast. And they say that well, there are many shipwrecks there, and some people blame the paranormal activity at the lighthouse, on the shipwrecks there.
Really?
But the thing that you hear most often about the Point Sur lighthouse is people see a man who has been referred to as an admiral. They see this tall man in like some sort of blue naval type uniform. Supposedly a young girl reported seeing him years ago, and some of the volunteers working at the lighthouse have seen him. I just today, in preparation for this, I put on the Travel Channel. They show Ghost Adventures, right? Yeah. On the Ghost Adventures website, they have clips from the show they did there, and two of the guys were in one of the buildings, and they swore that they saw this man. They described a tall, thin man with high cheekbones in a blue uniform. And one of the men said, who are you? And a female, instead of a male voice, they actually picked up on a recording a female voice as if she was answering them, who said, Admiral. It's pretty clear.
Oh my!
So people might want to look that up on the Travel Channel, on the Ghost Adventures site. There's there's a bunch of clips from the show on there. So they're among quite a few people who've supposedly seen this man there. The woman who showed me around there hadn't had any personal experiences, but a lot of the volunteers and people she works with there have had experiences there. Supposedly there's also like poltergeist experiences where people will be in a room and this one room with their file cabinets and the drawers are all shut, and they leave and they come back a few minutes later and all the drawers are open and that sort of thing. That's fairly common. So.
Has anything in particular supposed to have happened there?
Not that I'm aware of, other than the shipwrecks that happen nearby. So some people feel that maybe this man who seems to hang out there may have been involved in one of those shipwrecks. There's also speculation there was I guess there were some Swedish keepers there who had been in the Swedish Navy. Oh. And then maybe there had been somebody who was an officer in the Swedish Navy who later became a keeper there. So not sure about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Should we keep going here?
Sure.
Well, actually, it's
we're
the bottom of the hour. So
you're just, carrying us away.
Why don't we go ahead and take the break, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Supernatural Magazine, the UK's newest paranormal magazine, provides support to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. It is the magazine's goal to bring every aspect of supernatural news and research from around the world under one roof to create a universal platform for all those interested in the supernatural. More information is available at supernaturalmagazine.com. You are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM, and we'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And from the community calendar, the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies. The KRI Center is pleased to present Understanding Paranormal Mechanics with Shane Sawa. Shane has been helping families and individuals for over 25 years. He has a rare 100% success rate in getting rid of nasty parasitic hauntings. His understanding of the mechanics of what allows a haunt is untouched. Shane gets called in when other investigators and clergy fall short. Be sure to join us for a rare glimpse into the area of the paranormal that Shane understands like no one else. And that is Saturday, January 23rd at 4 p.m. And cost is by donation. For more information, contact the KRI Center at 603-772-9300. And you have some upcoming guests for us.
Our upcoming guest list starts with January 16th. Valerie LaFazzo and Mike Stevens from Seacoast Saucers will be in our studio. They're very good friends of ours, and they're the founders of the Seacoast Saucers group, which is where people can get together to air their personal concerns about UFO experiences or sightings. On January 23rd, Andy Kitt, who is author and founder of the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies in nearby Stratham, New Hampshire, he too will be in the studio to talk to us about his new program, his new program schedule at the Institute, including upcoming speakers and workshops. January 30th, we're welcoming back Reverend Betty Comerford and her writing and investigative partner, Reverend Steve Wilson, who again will join us in our studio to assist those who suspect that they may have empathic abilities. This information can be found in their jointly written book, The Reluctant Empath. February 6th, Sarah Sutherland is another one of those people dogged by her own psychic experiences. Her book, Haunted by the Abyss, is a first-hand account of encounters with a demonic force, aliens, spirits from a Missouri cemetery, and more. February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day, Richard Estep, who's a transplant from the UK and presently living in Colorado, he'll return to our studios, well, at least over the phone, to discuss his new release, The World's Most Haunted Hospitals, True Life Paranormal Encounters in Asylums, Hospitals, and Institutions. And one more, February 20th. We're welcoming back through the magic of fiber optics, Mr. Steve Parsons from the UK, who is regarded as one of the foremost investigators of the paranormal. He holds classes on ghosts and has now organized the principles of his teachings in a book titled Ghostology, which is his latest release. And that's our upcoming guest list.
Okay, and so now let us go back to tonight's guest right here in the studio with us. Talking about his new upcoming book, which is coming out March 15th, about the Lighthouses of the West Coast. And Jeremy D'Entremont is here in the studio with some more fascinating tales of haunted lighthouses. Welcome back, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Take it away, Jeremy.
Sure.
Take it
Well,
away.
we're working our way south to north here. I don't think we're going to get through all of them tonight, but there's one more in California I was going to mention, and it's one called Battery Point Lighthouse. It's in Crescent City, which is almost on the border with Oregon. It's way up in California. And it's a spectacular lighthouse in its own way. It's not real big. It's another one of these so-called Cape Cod-style lighthouses, just a keeper's house with a lantern kind of mounted on the center of the roof. But it's a beautiful location, and it's on a little island where you can only walk out to it at low tide.
Oh.
And I planned it. I looked up the tides, and I got there at low tide, but unfortunately it was too late in the day. They weren't open. It is open, when the tides allow it to be open during the day, they do have it open to the public. But anyway, I was able to walk out on the island, and it's really quite beautiful. It's an very interesting place to visit. And it's got some ghost stories. They say, especially the last resident couple who lived there, I guess it was some years ago now, but they lived there as curators at the lighthouse. Their names were Jerry and Nadine Tugel, and they had a lot of very interesting experiences there. One of the things that happened to them is that Jerry Tugel used to keep his slippers at the edge of the bed, facing a certain way, and he said that for several nights in a row, every time he would, when he woke up in the morning, his slippers were turned around backwards, facing the other way from where he had left them. And after like 4 nights of that, he said to his wife, why are you doing this? Why do you keep moving my slippers around? She said she didn't touch them. She insisted she had nothing to do with it, didn't know what he was talking about. So then they started hearing footsteps going up the stairs of the tower. They heard that a few times, and they would investigate, and nobody was there. And one time, the light went out in the lighthouse for no apparent reason. There was an alarm that was supposed to go off when that happened, but it didn't go off. So they couldn't figure that out. And also their cats were afraid of something. The cats wouldn't go into certain rooms. They would go into some of the rooms and not others. And there was one particular room when the cats would go into it, they would only walk on top of the furniture. They would never walk on the floor.
Really?
And the cats just acted kind of weird, like there was something going on in some of these rooms. So.
Yeah. That's interesting, yeah.
I'm sure you guys have heard stories about animals reacting.
Oh, sure.
Cats and dogs reacting to things.
Not wanting to walk on the floor is peculiar.
Yeah, I never heard that one anywhere else. But
Now, what period of time was this?
this was not that many years ago. I think maybe 20 or 30 years ago, something like
Oh.
that. And more recently, there was a paranormal investigation there. Some people actually from a local college did an investigation, and they claimed that they found the presence of 3 spirits there. They said 2 adults and a child. I don't have more detail on that, so I'm not quite sure. I don't think they knew the identities of these.
Oh, it was probably the child that was playing with the slippers.
It could very well be, yeah.
Playing little games.
That would make sense, unless there was a dog that was playing with the slippers, and that's what's freaking out the cats too. I don't know.
No,
Dogs like
be.
slippers, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
Or
a
maybe,
thought.
maybe it was the cats that were playing with the slippers.
That's possible too.
What was supposed to have happened?
I don't know of any particular
no.
story,
Okay.
attached to it. So,
Is it now automated?
oh yeah,
Oh, it is,
Yeah,
okay.
just to be clear, there's really no more traditional lighthouse keepers in our country. All the lighthouses, the ones that are still
Automated.
active, which is most of them for navigation, they're all automated now.
Hmm.
We have one lighthouse keeper in the United States at Boston Light and Boston Harbor. Sally Snowman there. is
Yep.
The
And
only,
that's it?
That's it. Yep.
Wow.
The only one, huh?
Yep, she is the only one in the country today. So there's a couple of lighthouses in Oregon that have very interesting stories, and one especially, it's certainly one of the most spectacular locations I saw on my trip, the Hassell Head Lighthouse on the mid-coast Oregon. It's
I
about
don't think
halfway
I've
up the
seen it.
coast. Fantastic place. It's very popular. It's one of the most popular lighthouses on the West Coast, near the town of Florence, Oregon. Mm-hmm. It's also near a town called, I didn't know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled Yachats. How do you think you pronounce that? Yachats. You would never guess how they pronounce it out there. They tell me it's pronounced Yahats. Yahats.
Yahats. Is that Native American of some kind?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of Native American names out there. Hassell Head, actually, it's named for Bruno Don Heceta, a Spanish explorer. So
Oh.
that's not a native name. There's a lot of, they tend to be either native names or Spanish names, of course, on the West Coast. But anyway, the Hassell Head Lighthouse is on a very high bluff, a couple hundred feet above the water. It's a beautiful place. And there's the brick lighthouse tower and a keeper's house that's a pretty good distance away from the lighthouse. The ghost stories seem to be centered around the house, the former keeper's house, which is now a B&B. So it's an opportunity for people to stay at a notoriously haunted house. And they call the resident ghost at the house there Rue. Rue.
Rue.
R-U-E.
Okay. Street
which-
in French?
Right, it would be. But it seems like a good name for a ghost, Rue. Like I rue the day or whatever. Or
Ruminating?
I don't know. But they also call her the Gray Lady. I think the name Rue came about through an investigation, like from a Ouija board or whatever. So I don't know if we can put a lot of stock on that. But that's what she's generally known as. The story that you usually hear is that Rue, or the Lady in Gray, was the wife of one of the keepers there back in the late 1800s, and that her daughter died, possibly committed suicide. The story you usually hear is that the daughter drowned accidentally, and then the mother committed suicide out of despair. And that she haunts the lighthouse, kind of looking for her daughter.
That's really sad.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if there's any proof for any of this. I've found in my research over the years with a lot of the New England ghost stories, lighthouse ghost stories, that the experiences, the weird stuff that people experience often comes first, and the stories. And I think there are cases where the stories
Grow up around,
kind of grow up around the things that people experience. So, a lot of times I think the line between legend and history is kind of hard to define. But there's a lot of stories about the Gray Lady or Rue at the Hassell Head Lighthouse. Supposedly there was one time in the 70s when a worker was doing some work in the attic in the house, and he claimed that he saw the reflection of a woman in the glass, and he turned around to see a woman actually like floating in the room near him.
Bet he didn't finish his paint job.
No, he didn't finish his paint job. They say he screamed and ran out of the attic. Later he was working again, but he refused to go back in the attic. But he was working outside on the other side of the outside of the house, and he accidentally broke the attic window, the same window where from inside he had seen the reflection earlier. He refused to go back in to clean up the glass after he broke this window. And they say that the next day people went in and found the glass all swept up in a neat pile as if somebody had swept it up, even though nobody had gone up there.
I've heard
Have
that.
you heard that story?
I have.
Yeah, I guess it's a pretty well known.
That's unique.
Yeah. So anyway, again, there's all kinds of seems to be a lot of activity there as far as the
name of that again, Jeremy?
Hassell Head, Heceta.
Hassell Head. Okay.
Yeah. So, if anybody, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed the Oregon coast. It is so beautiful there. And if I had to pick one lighthouse in that part of the coast, Hassell Head is
very dramatic, isn't it?
If you're just going to visit a very small number of lighthouses on the West Coast, Hassell Head should be at the top of the list. It's a beautiful one. It's also got an incredible lens, a first order Fresnel lens, which means the largest kind that they made.
How far does it project? 20 miles out to sea, maybe?
I'm not sure the official rating these days, but it's at least 20 miles. I mean, and it would have been probably more like 25, 26 miles, and it's at its most powerful. Yeah.
And are most of these white lights, or do they have a variety?
Most of them are white lights. There are also lighthouses with red lights and a smaller number with green lights.
Green.
There are some in Oregon. There's another lighthouse I visited. I don't have a ghost story for it, but one called the Umpqua River Lighthouse in Oregon at the mouth of the Umpqua River. That has a first order lens, which the first order lens is in the neighborhood of 10 feet tall.
Wow.
They're made up of like over 1,000 individual prisms glued together. Wow. Mostly made in France, although some were made in England. But
you can't look directly into them, can you?
Oh, you can.
Can you?
Yeah, you can. Although, they are obviously quite bright at night. At the Umpqua River Lighthouse, they allow the public to go up to the top of the lighthouse, and they don't let you go actually inside the lens, but you can actually look up from underneath up into the lens. And it's got alternating red and white panels, so it revolves and creates an alternating red and white flash, and it's an incredible work of art. I call it those lenses functional art. So that was one of the most spectacular things I saw.
Oh, it sounds beautiful.
Yeah. I wish I could. I didn't get to be there at night. I've heard that the light when we see it revolving at night is
stunning.
Phenomenal. Yeah. So I hope to get back there someday. Moving up, I know we're getting a little short on time here, but there's a neat story at a lighthouse called Yaquina Bay Lighthouse in Newport, Oregon, a little farther north. And this is a lighthouse. It's another one of these so-called Cape Cod-style lighthouses, a building with the lantern mounted on the middle of the roof. It was only an active lighthouse for 3 years, 1871 to 74, and then it was replaced by another lighthouse a few miles away, the Yaquina Head Lighthouse, that was in a better location. The Yaquina Bay Lighthouse has a famous ghost story, and it's people debate whether the story comes from a fictional short story that was written, or whether the fictional short story was actually based on true events. That's one of those things, like which came first, the chicken or the egg. But the lighthouse was, again, only active in the 1870s for a few years. In 1899, a woman wrote a story. Her name was Leishan Miller. It was published in Pacific Monthly, a magazine at the time. It was called The Haunted Light at Newport by the Sea was the name of the story. And in the story, she talked about a young woman who was visiting that area, staying at a Newport hotel, and supposedly she went with a group of young people to visit the lighthouse. And the story goes that they went into the lighthouse. They weren't really supposed to be there, but they went inside. And when they're leaving, the girl, this young woman whose name was given as Muriel Trevenard, that she realized she had left a handkerchief inside the lighthouse. So she went back in to get it. And the other people with her heard screams, and they went back, and she was never seen again.
Oh, no.
So the story goes, they went back in the lighthouse, and they found nothing except her handkerchief and a pool of warm blood on the floor. So the story goes. What's that?
I said, all right.
Yeah. So it's a neat, well, I don't know if neat is the right word. It's kind of a gruesome story, but it's an interesting story. They say she was never found and that a dark stain marks the floor where her blood was found, although I was there and I didn't see any dark stain, and I don't think there is really such a thing. And people claim to see her looking, a figure of a woman looking out a window or out of the lantern of the lighthouse.
And that's the older one, right? The original?
Yeah. Both of those lighthouses still exist, a couple of miles away from each other. The other one has ghost stories, too. The Aquina Head Lighthouse actually has a lot of stories, too. And several keepers did die at that lighthouse. So it's a case where the stories there may be based on actual fact, people who actually died there. If you saw the movie The Ring, the horror movie.
R-A-N-G, Ring?
Yeah. Do you remember the movie The Ring?
Yes.
There's a little bits about a lighthouse in that. They show glimpses, and it's the Aquina Head Lighthouse in Oregon that they show in the movie The Ring.
Every time.
And it is kind of spooky looking. But there's, it's, again, there were definitely keepers who died at the Aquina Head Lighthouse, but it's a little hard to tell, exactly what's true and what's not true. Some, I'm sure both of you are very familiar with how easily legends can grow, or
Oh, yeah.
and things get repeated enough that they become sort of truth in quotes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's really hard to tell the difference sometimes, but there were definitely at least 3 keepers who died at the Aquina Head Lighthouse.
And what do they experience, people visiting?
Well, let me read you a quote from a paranormal researcher named Anne Fillmore, who studied researched the Aquina Head Lighthouse and spent time there. She said, quote, "Of all the lighthouses in all the world, this one rings all the bells and whistles when it comes to being haunted. It's had those spooky stories tied to it since it was built. There's too many to brush aside." She said, "You know with a certainty that a haunting has taken place here, and it's real. Even the seagulls circling Aquina Head and other even the seagulls circling Aquina Head are much louder than any birds I have ever heard," she said. I can't vouch for that. I didn't notice the seagulls being any louder there than anywhere else. But, there are places that have a certain feel about them, and I could see that. I was there by myself for a while. I didn't get to go inside that one, but it definitely had an interesting feel to it. I could imagine it,
Yeah, and especially where there were
deaths.
Deaths related to the property. That.
What have been the reported hauntings?
Well, one of the keepers who was there, he was there for this man named John Zenor was a keeper there. This was after some of the other keepers had died. He was there between 1932 and 54, and he in his reports that he would file, he said that he experienced what he called ghosts there. He said someone unseen would come in and go up the spiral stairs, and he said he heard strange whispers, and he said when other people would visit, those whispers would stop, but he heard them a lot. There's also the phenomenon of keepers being in these isolated places, sometimes with very few other people around for long periods of time, which can kind of lend itself to...
Plays on your imagination.
It will play in your imagination. Yeah. So, again, it's a little hard to tell sometimes the line between imagination and the paranormal. This is not news to you. I know that.
Yeah, still fascinating.
It absolutely is, yeah. So I could go on here, but I know we're getting a little short on time.
Yeah, we've run out of time again, like we always seem to manage to do.
But we want to give you enough time to talk about your websites and your lectures and your tours and whatever else, and
everything that's coming up.
Sure, it's kind of the off season right now for a lot of this stuff, but one of the things I do is I have a little business called New England Lighthouse Tours, and I give minivan tours to lighthouses. Mostly like between Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and the Portland, Maine area, although sometimes I do go to other places. And I've done this for 8 years now. So they're very personal tours. I only take no more than 5 people at a time. And I have just, when I say just, I mean as of yesterday, posted my 2016 schedule for those tours online. So if people go to newenglandlighthousetours.com, they can see my upcoming schedule, which begins in May.
In May, okay.
Mid-May. Although I can do off-season tours by appointment, but obviously the weather can be a little unpredictable.
Yeah, it's a little iffy right now.
So the main season for that is May to October. But so that's coming up. I don't have any lectures scheduled in the immediate future, although I do have the event I'll be doing with you in April. I think you'll probably be telling people more about that as time goes on.
April 9th, the New England Parafest 2016.
That's right.
At
the Ashworth in Hampton.
Ashworth Hotel in Hampton. And
Yeah,
Jeremy is going to be one of the speakers there.
As are we.
Yes, we are too.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. Let's see. So the books are coming out. I've also got new editions of some other books I wrote. I did one on Lighthouses of Massachusetts, Lighthouses of Rhode Island, Lighthouses of Connecticut. New editions of all 3 of those are going to be coming out by May or June. I'm not sure the exact date on
And
that.
when you have a new edition of something like that, are more lighthouses included, or why is there a new edition? Just new printing?
Those books have been out of print for a few years, so they're coming back into print, and some of the material is updated a bit. It's bringing it up to the present day.
Sure, yeah.
So people can watch for those as well.
Wonderful.
My website, again, newenglandlighthouses.net is my primary website, newenglandlighthouses.net, New England Lighthouse Tours for the tours.com, newenglandlighthousetours.com. I also have a Facebook group on New England Lighthouses with over 8,000 members, very active,
Excellent.
great group.
Okay.
I invite people to look that up, search Facebook for New England Lighthouses and become a member.
Don't forget, Jeremy is a wonderful photographer, and he's got calendars out there for sale,
I
too.
do.
Absolutely stunning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's right. Okay. Well, we thank you very much, Jeremy, for joining us again. Always a pleasure. Always fascinating stories.
Thank you so much. It's really always very much a pleasure being here. I appreciate it.
And we have come to the end of the hour once again. And so that is Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. Craig Mosier with the Graveyard Shift is coming right up.
And we hope everyone has an excellent evening, and thank you for listening.
In this world